Hi, Lisa McWhinnie here. I've become quite addicted to listening to the sound of my own voice, apparently, because I don't know how many videos I've videotaped today, probably about 10 or something like that, and I still can't go to sleep. So I guess just the creative energy or just the excitement. I don't know, this is a feels like a new and budding career for me, and I don't know if I'll make any money at it, but I'm having a good time of it right now. I have to tell you too that part of the reason why I took a an online YouTube influencer course many years ago, Jump Cut, um, excellent course. It was fairly expensive. It was $1,500 then. I don't know what it is now, or even if it still exists. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but they were one of the earlier successful YouTubers, and they did an online course called Jump Cut, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. If you check out my other videos under Starling Prayer, um, I think it's one word or two, Starling Prayer, and you'll see a very much heavier version of me. I do a video on addiction and one on mental health. If you look in the background of both of those videos, the what's it called? There's a poster from Jump Cut, which is basically rules of virtuality. I think it is. I think it is. Anyway, it was an excellent course. Highly recommend it. And the reason I didn't pursue it too much then is because, like I talked about in one of the other videos, self-esteem is a huge um, necessity in being successful in anything, and it's taken me a long time to get confident enough to see ugly pictures of myself. I can look fairly good, mostly in still life. So photographs, I look much better because I can kind of take the photograph, and when I see the right angle and see the right look, you click the button and it stays that way. Video is very different than that, and depending on the lighting and the time of day, and what room it's in, and background colors, outfits, things like that, it can get very complicated to look good on video continuously. So I was never very good at looking at uh, pictures of myself or videos of myself because I just thought of how horrible I looked. So over the years, I put a septum piercing in a couple of years ago, and I got some spacers going on and stuff. And I've dressed more and more. Um, how should I say it? Let's just say noticeably in the last few years. So I've gotten quite good at um, ignoring the looks. And when I put the septum piercing in, it had been a long time goal of mine. I grew up in a very artsy town, and I remember seeing septum piercings on some of the um, artsier women in Guelph mostly, way back in the 80s. And it was always one of those things that I always wished I could do, but never felt I had the courage. So a couple of years ago, I finally did it myself. I bought a piercing kit and watched some videos. I don't highly recommend that, but it was less painful because I could stop when it got too painful. Um, but it's hard to put in yourself, and you can't really re-pierce it. So what's my point? So when I finished doing the piercing and put the nose ring in, I felt more me, and it was one of those things that it was an outward expression of how I felt on the inside. I've always been a rebel. The One of the reasons why I turned to punk, like I told you in another video, we didn't grow up with money, and my clothing was quite horrible through most of my young life. Hair was horrible. And then when I was 14, my parents granted me a gift to go to Scotland for 5 weeks to visit an aunt and uncle. And I went shopping with my mom to buy some clothing for the trip. And at 14, I had already been going downtown and window shopping in all the shops. There was some consignment stores downtown Guelph, and there was some just some funkier shops that were not so expensive. So anyway, I took my mom into some of those places, and I managed to get um, some really nice clothing and nice summer clothing for very little money. And when I showed up at school in some of these outfits, all of a sudden the popular kids, I don't mean to pick on them, but the popular kids all of a sudden wanted to talk to me. And I was like, I'm the same person I was 10 days ago, and now you want to talk to me. I was very angry. So when I went to Scotland, I'd already been listening to U2, which was a very punk band back in the 80s, like early 80s. I was about 13 when I started listening to U2. I was already listening to Guns N' Roses and um, The Clash, The Cure, The Cult, already Depeche Mode, all that kind of new wave and punk stuff. I was already listening to that on CFMY. And what's my point? So when I went to Scotland, I found a picture of a funky hairdo in a magazine, and I convinced my aunt to convince her, but I asked her if I could go for a haircut. But I had curly hair, and the hairdresser, um, anyway, it ended up horrible. It was a horrible haircut, horrible because my hair was curly and it was a straight haircut because I prefer straight hair, but I always had curly hair. So now that the spiking up the ends with the scissors is more popular. I can do some of the straighter cuts with a little bit of effort. But anyway, it was a horrible haircut. But we did go out shopping, and I bought some beiges and blacks. I bought a funky little pair of pointed toe black shoes because we had a uniform at school, then a kilt and stuff, but they went with the uniform too. And one of the tops came with a brooch at the neck, and I started putting that with my school uniform. I had braces, which on my teeth, which it was a horrible, horrible time. But what was happening was that I was starting to transition into punk because I really despised how much emphasis was put on looks. Really despised it, and and how much pressure is put on um, people in general to look good. Really bothered me, and so I started to move into punk, and I switched schools because the the group and the way I was known in Lourdes at the time, the school I went to, Our Lady of Lourdes, um, I knew I was never going to be able to branch out into any other sort of fashion style or lifestyle. So I went to another high school, and the people I hung out with were the punk rockers, and I know they're a highly misunderstood group. All punk rockers are severely traumatized in their families of origin, and they grow up rebelling against the fact that society as a whole covers it up, covers it up, covers it up, covers it up, and lies about it and blames the victims generation after generation. And I learned a lot about cell memory, how um, DNA is changed by trauma. And so by the time, you know, 2026 rolls around, it's a shit show because of the amount of trauma that our current children are carrying in their DNA. Um, and it's clearly being displayed in the world, clearly being displayed. Um, so and my life, was destroyed at a point by addiction. And then I was put on medication and told I was sick when really it was the medication that was causing the symptoms or the bulk of the symptoms. And then I was hospitalized and medicated and hospitalized and medicated and basically lied to. And the trauma I went through was covered up and covered up and covered up and covered up. And I was jailed. Uh, you know, raped in hospitals, forcibly injected 50 something times in the hips. Um, yeah, just treated disgustingly because I'm a trauma victim and no one wants to own it. So I remember where I started with that video. Where was I going with that video? I don't care. That's what I needed to say. Unity, love, remember that? Fucking service.